fuck up.
which is in the museum in Madrid.
You're not a mysterious
One of
region.
the surviving documents.
You're a psychopath, dude.
That this particular
Yeah, these people over here are. My dad called me one. It's cool. He's kind of a narcissist.
The story is told in pictures. But among these pictures, there is one in which the sky's dragon, or the sky's serpent, is pouring
No, just
water
drag me out again like he likes to.
from its mouth. And below this, the god of death is dancing on the earth. Now, this was a long time ago, long before the coming of the Spaniards. But the records even go much further than that. According to the Chinese, the previous existence before our present coming to this earth.
Try to reduce any amount of fun possible.
So
So hook me up, make me waste my shit, basically. And they plug down my bowl. They're like, how you going to plug it now without your stick? I'm going to wash it out, you fucking faggot bitch. You should be asleep right now.
Correspond to Noah and his wife, their 3 sons and their 3 wives, were the 8 who were saved.
Showing you their methods, and I'm pretty sure they're meth heads.
Chinese fellas.
Pretty sure they're right over here.
Around,
they use their voices
here,
really well.
There and everywhere. It's a very interesting story, but what does it really mean? Is it really an archaeological curiosity, or does it have some dynamic value for us today? I would like to think of Atlantis much as Lord Bacon did in his book, The New Atlantis, in which he says in very simple terms,
Now I'm up for a minute.
the New Atlantis,
I'm fucking annoyed.
which is America.
Oh well.
Bacon was quite convinced that on the Western Hemisphere, a great empire would arise. An empire that would
Guess what? I'll go back to bed here in a minute.
the glory of the Atlantean
Then I'll go to church in the morning.
story.
Hopefully,
And that this new world would not be destroyed. It would not turn against the God.
Big old bummer face on you, motherfuckers.
Misuse the energies of nature. And as a result, would become a new world, a restoration of the Golden Age. Now, when we study this Atlantean problem a little more carefully, we realize there have been a number of speculations on it.
Well, you don't like I got manly peel on you?
Vice President Dawes made quite an extensive search
You need somebody?
for the Atlantean world. A number of good archaeologists and ethnologists.
No way, right?
devoted
Yeah,
time
I didn't
to
think
it.
so.
And the general attitude is no longer to
Like, come on, where are you
describe
guys?
it as a-
Freemasons.
but to try to find out what its actual meaning could be.
Where are my
Now, let us
Freemasons at?
suppose that Solon
Where
was
are they?
correct. And that Solon, being an old man,
They get offended.
was unable to do what he had intended to do, and that was to write out an account of the lost Atlantis.
Yeah, you
And he
get
found
offended.
it, or it was given to him, in the caves under the temple of Thais.
Dwarf you them? Yeah.
Here on columns formed of orichalcum, a metal that cannot
Don't listen to
perish.
people. No,
He
they evil.
recorded the story of the
No,
lost
evil.
world. These 2 tablets are sometimes referred to as the Tables of Enoch, and we find a great deal of mystical lore surrounding this story. In any event, Solon, being very old and unable to carry on the work, passed the legend on to one of his descendants who was a student of Plato's. And this student, in turn, told
No,
Plato
they evil, and they
he took
evil,
the
and they evil
story
too.
to use it as a great symbolical account of the descent of man. Now, Plato does not deny that the story is literally true.
No, he does
But
not.
he does point out so many very subtle and unusual
Atlantis.
details that we are forced to realize that he embellished it to represent the entire story of the planet Earth and its development. According to Plato, at a remote time, the gods of high Olympus distributed the world
Did you ever
to
have a
their
movie too?
various sub-deities. And to Poseidon was given the lands of the sea,
Someone's like, yes,
The
and
great
yes, and
ocean.
yes, we have.
the islands, the archipelagos. And Poseidon created his kingdom in the oceans. And he
Someone already did it
created
for us. He bought
a
those
wonderful
patents on
city
Mudras,
called the City of the
And
Golden
then try to
Gate.
control my hand with it with their
And
using
in
white
this
jacket
city was
technology.
the temple to him. And in this temple were the tablets containing the laws of life.
What exact technology were they
The
using
laws
against
that
me?
must be
Remember that?
obeyed
My
if
wrists and
man
stuff.
is to
I couldn't
survive
make certain hand signs
and
and
to
hand
enjoy the
gestures.
favors of the gods.
Even
And the
now,
Atlantic
sometimes.
Empire
Exactly.
consisted of 7 islands.
And why
These
exactly?
7 islands also occur in the
Because they really don't want me
Mexican
to with
story.
their technology.
These islands came together to form a league.
Prove that I'm straight at magic.
And
Just
this
like that.
league, in turn, created a kind of empire. And in the course of ages, the princes of the islands of the Atlantides became very proud. They decided that they would conquer the world.
Why am I up? Because I
So in order to achieve this great end, they decided to send expeditions of conquest over all the other parts of the then Atlantean distribution.
You got pissed off.
Now, this distribution at that time consisted, much as it does today, of countries of various degrees of development. It was not an uninhabited world. The Atlanteans were not the only people. But these other people were comparatively primitive. They were like the natives of Africa or the natives of some Polynesian area, or perhaps the natives of some distant islands of the South Pacific. They were primitive people, but they existed. And the Atlantean merchants went to them, traded with them, and bartered with them. Plato states definitely that Atlantis had a great mercantile, that it traveled to all parts of the world, that it even visited Europe and it passed out to South America. But gradually this empire grew more and more proud. Gradually fame, wealth, and power became the great objectives for life.
Mental consciousness.
These peoples possessed extrasensory perceptions that had not yet been closed by the process of embodiment. They were like the extrasensory perceptions of small children, in whom faculties are partly active, which are now dormant in our racial groups. So in any way, these magicians, these sorcerers, these powerful ones who possess Brill being one motive power that is inexhaustible, something we could use today. That would carry anything, transport anything, activate anything that the human being could conceive. And so in their pride, these princes decided near the end of their time to invade what is now Europe. They decided to invade in the areas of the Mediterranean, North Africa, and the Middle East. So they sent great fleets to conquer these countries.
They say I waste too much.
In the meantime,
blah blah blah.
The deities,
they forced me to swallow really.
Realizing what was occurring, gave warnings and sent prophets, and told these people they were destroying themselves, but they were proud, and they gave no mind or no thought.
No, exactly, assholes.
And finally, they rebelled against
Someone's paying attention now.
And the gods reacted accordingly. In a single night, the great center of Atlantean culture, the last surviving fragment of an ancient order of life, disappeared into the ocean, and according to the Maya calendar, carried with it to death 60 million human beings. This was the end of a great cycle of misuses and abuses, in which those powers, forces, and principles which had been intended to be a common good to all mankind were perverted and in one way or another turned against the will of heaven, and in consequence they were destroyed. So this also causes us to have another little interlude here, which I think we should give a thought to. We are told by Plato and several other historians of the time that various agencies, various merchant travelers, explorers from Atlantis visited other lands.
Legally?
And among those who visited other lands were the priests of the Atlanteans, those who worshipped the great golden serpent.
No, they'll always say that laugh. My dad's up there going,
of the world.
Fucking drunk asshole.
Now these various missionaries, shall we say, went to primitive people, as we send missionaries today to underprivileged or gradually evolving groups. And these missionaries set up various institutions in the distant parts of the empire. the parts that were not actually destroyed by the destruction of the Atlantean Centerland. Now, it seems to me, and I realize that this is hypothetical, but it seems to me that this explains a series of legends and myths which are of interest. We are told, for example, that the people of Chaldea and Babylonia were very primitive, that they had not yet discovered the use of fire, that they did not know how to cook food, they did not know how to keep records, they had no medical knowledge, they had no laws to live by and no governments except tribal communes. And in the midst of all this time, while they were living along the shores of the sea, one day something strange happened. A being came out of the sea. This being, whom they called Alanis, had the body of a fish and the head of a human being, and wore on his head the head of a fish on it. If you see the old pictures, you realize that
Quit it with your technology,
is what we call today a mitre, which is practically exactly the shape of a fish's head. And this man who came out of the sea had scales. Now, scales could very well represent armor. He carried symbols with him, and he was a good man. And he came to these people, and he taught them. He gave them a written language. He gave them the knowledge of agriculture. He taught them astronomy and the mystery of the stars. He helped them to build a permanent government. He introduced them into the mysteries of architecture and the building of cities. And he also taught them the mysteries of heaven and the ways of the gods, and taught them to live in obedience. And he told them that in due time he would return. And then he went back to the sea, promising to come back one of these days, sometime in the future.
Did he?
And he walked out into the sea and disappeared.
I don't know, has he?
Now this seems to me to be a veiled story, could be a veiled story, of an Atlantean traveler,
Not quite, but almost.
a missionary perhaps, who came to these people, very much as the Chaldeans coming along the coast of Brittany and France gave them the beginnings of the culture of the Druids. This one who came out of the sea, dressed in armor, probably came on a ship, which came over the horizon and was regarded as evidence that he came out of the sea. The most important thing, I think, in this legend is that he promised to return.
Letting me know the story's true.
And they kept his laws, and they kept his rules for years, but he never came back. Now, on the opposite side of the world, something else was happening. The people of Central America were living in a very primitive state. Some of them were cannibals. They had no homes.
Some of them were cannibals.
Rude huts.
Living in a very primitive state.
They had no instruments except cut from stone. They did not know how to cook their food. They had no written language and no way of recording their history. No knowledge of any of these things. And while they lived in this primitive condition, a strange thing happened. An old man came to them, riding on the back of serpents. And he came to the shore, and he was welcomed by them, these people. And his name is preserved in the three great languages of the separate culture of the period and time and place. To the Aztecs, it was Kukulkan. To the ones who lived around Palenque, it was Vota. And to the Mayas, it was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. And this man came from the sea with a bonnet of wonderful plumes, almost like wings. And on his breast, he carried a cross.
Lawsuit's coming.
He came to them, and they received him with regard and esteem. And he taught them all the things that Alanis had taught the Chaldeans. He helped them to establish a permanent way of life. He gave them the beginnings of a written language,
we can get more leaves.
The only written language in the Western Hemisphere. He gave them good government. And then He said,
Nature's given that way, even though humans happen not
the
to be.
rules that I've given you. And in due time, I will return and claim the empire.
Like,
But the
church
meantime,
doesn't real.
obey
Never help.
the principles
Not in
I
our
taught.
church.
And these
But they will.
principles were of
We
very
know.
high quality
They're church
morally and
people.
ethically. Then this being went to the shores
know.
of the sea.
They're not really like
And as he stood there, he
Most
said
people
to the people that had assembled that a very bad
We'll see.
power was coming to them. Says Katlapoko, the god of war, was going to come from
But
the
they
south
know me.
to destroy
I've been
their
here for
empire.
fucking 20 years.
They should be true, however. They should keep the rules,
And we,
and
Yeah.
then he would return.
Yeah.
There are two
18
accounts of
years.
what happened to him. One that he called to the sea, and the raft of serpents returned. The raft of serpents could well have been a ship. And with the very animal heads and so forth that were
one in infinite.
engraved and written
One in
or
infinity.
painted or carved on the heads of ships.
About to be
The other explanation
19 years
is
on,
that he was transfigured and
basically.
rose to become immortalized and deified in the planet Venus. He said, I will come back.
I live in Weed, California. Basically.
And when
Yeah,
the
20 years.
Spaniards arrived, many centuries later, and their ships were anchored, the Aztec Emperor
They're
Montezuma
trying hard. With all their
took
like
the plumes on
really
the
powerful
crown,
tactics, I guess, to
took
them.
all the symbols of regality, and sent them by ambassador to Cortez, saying that he was Quetzalcoatl returned, and that therefore he was returning the kingdom which his people had kept trustworthy for ages. These stories are interesting. There's nothing you can do but remember these strange stories. The same story exists in China. In China, the world's reformation, the restoration of humanity was the result of a mysterious being who came out of a fish's mouth and rising out of the sea taught them the
You
secret
did
of
20
life.
years ago,
In
different
India,
job.
Vishnu, in his first incarnation, is born from the fish's mouth. Everywhere that sea was the source of instruction, something came from the sea. We can't
What
dogmatize.
did you get for it? What you were worth? No.
Is what it is. But it is interesting that at a remote period, certainly 8 or 10,000 years ago, if not more, doctrines and concepts and beliefs reached all parts of the world and are still reserved and preserved in all the mythologies, legends, and allegories of ancient peoples, and were recognized as the ultimate source of civilization.
When the Valley
Now, these were missionaries, travelers, philanthropists from the Atlantean Empire. They might have wished to come back. They
Freemasonry.
might have said that they would, or that others would follow.
Freemasonry.
And then
And
came the
America.
deluge. The center of the great wheel was destroyed. No one could come back. Little by little, these peoples in different areas
Assholes.
modified their beliefs.
Some
Interracial
of them did.
mingling brought about complications of stories concerning the descent of knowledge. Here in the southwest of the United States, they have the legend that originally humanity lived under the earth.
Because I will not quit smoking tobacco.
And a deluge came under the earth. And this deluge threatened the life of everything that lived. So humanity crawled up or climbed up to this upper world upon cornstalks and began to populate the earth. And the point where they came out of the earth is still sacred to the Navajo and the Hopi.
So they're hoping to give you cancer.
Years ago, I had the
Point.
privilege of bringing
But they
to
can't.
California temporarily as my guest one of the last of the great sand painters of the Navajo. A few weeks ago, when I was in Sedona,
And they tried heart attacks too.
I mentioned Claude, and everyone knew who he was.
They can do.
One of the
Not really.
greatest men of his time, an Indian, and a remarkable person. At that time, when he was up there, we had just published our large book.
Annoy me.
And I wanted him to see it. He had spoke no English. He had no idea what the book was about. So I turned to the plate of the table of Hermes, just in passing along through the book. You'll find it if you have it. And the old Indian stopped right there. It was Chaldean. He didn't know what Chaldean was. They heard of it. But he told me through Ashkenazwood, his interpreter, long, long ago, my people could read this. American Indian. Every once in a while, something like this happens, and no one knows why. But it all adds up to something that is very unusual and very interesting. I think if we follow all of the traditions that exist, we would summarize the highest terminal aspect of Atlantean culture as a very high culture, with scientific knowledge, with good map making, with many types of industry, arts, and sciences, accredited as having the first to domesticate the horse, with hospitals and clinics, and with various types of locomotion. And according to the old stories, the Atlanteans had the secret of flying through the air. We can doubt all these things. We don't know for certain. But we do know that there was on this planet at least 12, 15, 50,000 years ago. Because the Atlantean disfusion and its empires probably lasted for better than 200,000 years before the final destruction of Poseidonis. That there was a great civilization. One of the Hindu scriptures says, referring to the earth, the Great Mother has shaken many civilizations from her back. And maybe Atlantis was one of them. Maybe Lemuria was another. Perhaps Hyperborea was another.
They're hanging out, guys, trust me.
But in any event, far back, there were forms of life and culture very different from what we have today, which destroyed themselves by the misuse of the spiritual powers of life. So now we come to another interesting episode. In the last few years, there's been a great deal of emphasis upon extraterrestrials visiting our planet. Books have been written to show that somebody from outer space, presumably, who came here long ago, produced all kinds of mysterious monuments, records, engravings, pictures, and
these meth heads to wake me up. Basically,
they're supposed to have had airplanes, all this type of thing, and it was said to have come somewhere from outer space.
Did they? No. Take credit for you.
The outer space theory has certain difficulties involved.
I met them, no.
Which is
well,
not completely solved. It may not be solved.
If someone connected to them, yes.
It may all be true.
Them, yes.
But what we seemingly have overlooked is the possibility that these records that we now consider to arise from extraterrestrial sources could be the records of the great civilizations that were here before they destroyed themselves. That these people who are said to have come and brought all the secrets of life to these primitive peoples could have been the citizens of the great Atlantic Empire. The empire that was far higher and far more advanced in many ways, even than we are today.
Find out this really goes
Their
later.
civilization was different.
Good.
They were not bound tremendously to an industrial program. They didn't need it.
Yes and no.
And we wouldn't need it if we developed the resources within ourselves.
We do.
The idea that we have to run the planet the way we're running it now simply means that we do not recognize that within ourselves are the answers to the questions that we now find so difficult.
Right.
That actually, if we use the interior potential we have, we would have no need of all the problems of repressions and all the mysteries of exploitation that we suffer from today. How would it be to imagine for a moment at least that these so-called visitors were actually the Atlanteans? There is a long story of their activities whereas the story concerning extraterrestrials is rather dim and hard to put together. We base the extraterrestrial idea on one point alone, namely that something was brought here or came here at a time before it would seem possible that the human being could have developed or evolved these resources. Some believe that they brought with them electric batteries. Others believe that they wore space suits. Some say they came in space ships. But none of these things really exist to our minds except in the form of paintings and carvings.
These people are evil.
The main foundation of our belief is that something happened by which a culture came here or was here prior to our basic source.
No, I don't have asthma, you stupid cunt. Stop lying on your report. Right now.
It would simplify a number of matters.
Quit hitting your buttons. Quit torturing that man over there.
For the travel of these mysterious visitors. Suppose these mysterious visitors were simply...
Quit trying to control my cat. Quit trying to capture assholes over here. You guys should just die already. Because I'm trying to go to bed. And I'm going to church in the morning. And you're making everything fucking difficult, you piece of shit.
Where it is very dangerous for strangers to go. There are still primitive people who have no idea whatsoever of civilization and have
they're millionaires. They're millionaires, all of them.
Tremendous spread of our way of life. There are large areas which have not been touched, or so likely as to mean very little.
And they live right around us.
Most of the planet consisted of comparatively...
And they're fucking evil.
And the last of the great Atlantean diffusion, Posidonus, was an isolated island, separated by water. And Montezuma believed from reports that these men were centaurs, half man and half horse, and was not able to understand that these men were riding horses, which the Indians knew nothing about. Here, less than 500 years ago, we have a situation in which a higher cultured civilization moved in on the primitive one and was mistaken for gods until they proved that instead of being gods, they were ravishers of the earth.
No, I know it.
So,
watch them closely.
We might also find
them closely too, and them closely too, and them closely too now.
These mysterious priests of the...
Anyone who can watch me on a monitor right now, watch them closely. See what they do next.
Were undoubtedly wise in the mysteries of life. The ancient rites and mysteries of the Greeks and Romans and Egyptians, the secret and esoteric teachings that have descended to us from unknown antiquity.
4, 5, 6
have originated among the esotericists of Atlantis. There also seems to be quite a little evidence to the effect that when the great decision was made and the gods decreed that the Atlanteans had destroyed themselves and must be removed from the earth, that prophets arose among them in those last days before the end. And these prophets warned the people that they had disobeyed the gods, that they had sacrificed all that was good for selfishness, avarice, and power. And these prophets led certain groups of the Atlanteans away from Atlantis and into what is now Europe and the Near East.
There you guys go.
Survived.
And I say again.
If this migration occurred at least 12 to 15,000 years ago, we have some suspicion that many of the civilizations of the Near East and perhaps even of the Far East
make him do that. Yep, annoy him. They can annoy me. And now they're trying to show off again.
Who had gone away
so the fucking all the money they got from the government to look worth something, and really they're just stupid fucking cannibal serial killers.
A great number of the gods.
And they want to catch another one, huh? Exactly. But he's way ahead of it.
That the gods of the Egyptians were Atlantean deities, who originally perhaps actually and physically live.
Because he's their neighbor, and he annoyed them.
In any event,
And then he got magic powers. Like, oh, let's kill the kid.
The world was populated, in one sense, by refugees.
I heard he deserves money.
It's not,
if we killed him, and hopefully got his dad's house.
Story of the same type, which is
and his cats.
In many parts of the world, states that the Atlanteans
money.
earned their
Now fuck off and go to bed.
By an attempt to invade Europe.
Assholes.
They raised a great army and sent it against Europe and North Africa. And this great army was on the march and was in these areas, claiming them when the Central Islands were destroyed. Therefore, these armies could not return. There was no place to go back to. And many of them settled and mingled with the peoples of these areas to form some of these wonderful and mysterious civilizations which we have no real explanation for. We have very little explanation for how racial differentiation in recent times came about. The various anthropologists, so forth, have charts showing what happened. But as is the case in most of science, no one seems to know how it happened or why it happened. These things occurred. New bloodstreams came forth, mingled and mixed and intertwined. And each one brought with it part of its own culture. And these parts of ancient cultures seem to linger on, perhaps in lingual differences, in arts and crafts, in psychological structures, in habits and principles, even to a measure in bodily forms and structure. In any event, as Bacon points out, we have a challenge coming to us at the present time. And this challenge is more or less documented in terms of Atlantis, and I think this is the way Plato originally used it. You know, the story of Plato's Atlantis ends in the middle of a sentence. It was never completed. Bacon's New Atlantis ends in the middle of a sentence. It was never completed. Why? We don't seem to know. But I think that Bacon tells us about the importance of it. That the destruction of Atlantis is left by the tables of Enoch is the great story of the disaster of disobedience.
Lisa Garfield trying to make you
regardless of how we think about life or what we believe about life, it is impossible for us to go contrary to the will of heaven. Anything that goes contrary comes in the end to destruction. Plato and several others of the earlier writers also seems to fabularize this particular situation. Atlantis maybe is a submerged self in each of us. This is an interesting possible thought from a psychological standpoint.
No matter what, actually.
It may be that part of our nature which arose
Has he been that little bit?
To its ancient origin.
Sometimes.
If there is a record of disobedience and penalty, that record is probably primarily descending within the structure of the human being himself. It is something hidden in his own darkness. It is something that may bring him fear. It may bring him conscience. It may warn him of the dangers of the abuse of power and divinity. And if so, it may be the submerged part of man's nature. That part which was lost because of disobedience to the gods.
These guys are scared.
This may be the large, deep, all-spreading mystery of the fall of man.
Freemasons who got on the
ship. Which has been also recorded in various ways among practically all peoples of the earth. Atlantis also seems to have a very great fascination for the psychologist and the social reformer. Is it true that a civilization existed long ago which knew what we do not know today? Is there something lost in our way of life because it disappears under
That
the
was their
waters
technology.
of the Atlantic so far back in our story. Is it true that there were giants upon the earth in those days, mental giants, that had skills and abilities which they had derived from the studies of esoteric matters? Did black magic originate in Atlantis? It probably did, according to the Platonic discussion, because it was in Atlantis that for the first time man disobeyed the gods. And from disobedience fell the angel. The entire story of human progress, so-called, is today very largely a record of disobedience. The individual has broken the rules of life.
Shirt.
Some people haven't broken the rules of life, trying to study esoteric matters, hoping to find the secret of some strange magic long ago. But if they are those who have broken the rules,
basically,
and they are seeking a knowledge which they do not deserve,
don't typically come in and yell
which they do not have the character
but
to
not
use
really. You did a good job
constructively,
there, Garfield. Good
they
boy.
could cause another deluge upon the face of the earth. Therefore, an effort apparently has been made in ancient
But I brought him to
times
the
to
bathroom.
protect the
He's never
secret
to go when I
of
take him to the
essential
bathroom.
knowledge.
That was
There
just
are
a random
records
point.
of legends
Because they
and
trigger him
accounts
to. It's a nice big
everywhere
one. So I'm
of
happy for him.
secret keeping, esoteric schools.
Just to piss me off, huh, people?
There are accounts of ways by which the human being can develop faculties and powers at present beyond his capacity. The scoffer says the whole thing is superstition, that there are no such forces, but that isn't proven by scoffing. It is only proving by testing. I remember years ago, when I was in India, I met an old gentleman whom I make the hero of a book called The Guru. This old gentleman was a guru.
Yeah, well, I'm talking to the other
I
side.
was never
I
a
know it.
disciple of his or anything of that kind, but I did know him. And we talked about many things relating to the yoga, Vedanta, Tantra.
It's a Freemason suit, I know it.
These secret arts which are said to have been given to the world by the gods in ancient times.
No, I know it.
And in talking about it, we see this old gentleman was sitting there very quietly on a little white square like a sheet in his room in a little stucco house in Calcutta. He was sitting there in a lot of
These
little
fucking people
feet
do
with his
these.
own hair.
Me will get there.
So I said to him, I'm going back.
They can confirm it themselves.
And that is one of the holy men
Best
of India.
chance they
We
got.
have you a message you'd like to have carried to the American people. And the old gentleman sitting in the midst of his hair, where it joined his head, it was pure white, at the outer end it was brown.
They're like, treat us well,
Looked me straight
and we'll
in
tell you
the eye and
everything.
said, yes, there is.
It's a lie.
Tell the American people to be practical.
Best they can to cover their fucking asses.
That sounds like a very strange thing to say under the conditions. Because if there was anything that ever looked
They like torture so much, why don't they get it?
doing.
That's how they can do.
So I
We
carried
can already
that
prove
question a
everything.
little further. And he explained to me, he said, I would like to make a recommendation.
The way that spirits do.
To send over to us 5 or 10 of your best equipped scientists. The ones who have the greatest knowledge that your academies and schools, universities, and institutions can produce. Leave them with us for 10 years, and they will reform Western wisdom. We built it all on the outside, when in fact we have failed in the greatest mystery of all, the realization that within ourselves are the secrets we are searching for everywhere else. And also within ourselves
There we
are
go.
energy resources which cannot be exhausted.
I know
And
that.
that there can be and should be an older science of life by means of which human beings could build a world that would be good. A world that would be worth living in for everyone who lives here.
No, we would be
Now,
flipping out at
those
these motherfuckers.
masters
Tip.
of the magic of Atlantis lost all by perversion.
We knew for a fact they were doing this every time he coughed.
They lost their world and their beautiful cities and their
Hurting somebody else, physically.
Nothing remained because they failed. Now, at the moment, we shall also remind again of the Atlantis of Bacon. Namely, what we have to do.
They're that desperate.
He said, Bacon in the Atlantis said that
I basically got permission
the
too.
motto of the great Atlantean experiment was that man should learn to know.
Just so you wouldn't take me seriously on a couple things. Until you do.
Man to know. And should that nothing remain because they failed. Now, at the moment, we shall also remind again of the Atlantis of Bacon. Namely, what we have to do. He said, Bacon in the New Atlantis said that we might say the motto of the great Atlantean experiment was that man should learn to know all that is possible for man to know, and should dedicate all he knows to the unselfish good of all that lives. It's a pretty big order. And we're not working that way too well at the moment. But the principle still remains true. That when the individual works for himself, his empires fall. When he works for the common good, he builds that.
Turned into the enemy, didn't they? So a lot of these guys did. A lot of these guys we taught this stuff to were evil. Turns out.
Of the pyramid. And the pyramids are very interesting things.
The pyramid's a very interesting thing, huh?
We know that they're in Central America.
The eye
Recently, a year or two ago, I saw a photograph
of DK.
Of pyramids in the heart of China, which are not generally known, but they're
could be Nemesis too.
These pyramids, like the mounds of antiquity.
These pyramids, like the mounds of antiquity.
And what that meaning is appears to be also rather uncertain. According to the conservative Egyptologists, Mayologists, for that